Welcome back to the California Conversation. I'm Tess Abraham. Earlier this week, a judge ruled that SpaceX, which is Elon Musk's rocket company, could file a lawsuit against a California state agency for political discrimination. Earlier in the year, this lawsuit was actually brought and struck down by a judge previously, and so this is pretty big news for Elon Musk and for SpaceX as his company. Now, what happened? What could this mean for California regulators? And why does it matter for us? We'll be breaking it all down today. But before we get started, make sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell to stay up to date on all things California politics. And if you want more information about sources used in compiling today's episode, you can check out my corresponding article on my website, which is linked below. Okay, so why in the world am I talking about Elon Musk? Let's start by setting the scene for why you should care about this topic. Elon Musk is alleging that a California state regulator known as the California Coastal Commission has actually discriminated against his company, SpaceX, based on his personal political beliefs. Now, that's a pretty big accusation. If that's happening, then that should concern all of us. We want to make sure that there are no state agencies or really anyone across our state who is allowed to discriminate against certain people, certain businesses, certain employees based on their political beliefs. So really, this case represents much bigger issues in the areas of free speech, government regulation and overreach, and really your rights. California should not be allowed to bully anyone based on their ideological, political, or personal beliefs. And really, as conservatives who value a limited government and clear constitutional boundaries, it should concern us if there is any even allegations of government overreach. So I think then that it's pretty important for us to just understand what's going on here and keep a watch on how this case is unfolding. Is a California agency actually discriminating based on political beliefs, or does Elon Musk just have a vendetta against the state that used to be a home base for a lot of his companies? So to understand all of this, we need to go exactly through what happened. Let's walk through a timeline of events. All the way back in 2013, SpaceX started using Vandenberg Space Force Base as a launch point for their Falcon 9 launches. Let's take a step back. What the heck does that mean, and where is this located? Vandenberg is located in Lompoc, California, which is about an hour north of Santa Barbara, so think mostly Southern California area. And the reason that SpaceX started to use Vandenberg is because it actually had a lot of existing infrastructure that they needed in order to be launching their rockets into space. Now, from their first launch in 2013 all the way up to 2023, SpaceX has been gradually increasing the number of launches that they do within that area. And so another key thing for us to understand is what these launches are and why they're so important to the company. These launches are the core of SpaceX's financial and strategic operational model. It's really their main point of business. So when you think about what SpaceX does, one of the things that they do is they have Starlink. You might have heard of that. That is their satellite network. Well, for Starlink to be able to work, they need thousands of satellites to be launched up into space. And roughly, you can launch about 60 satellites in just one launch. There have been some launches that carry more with them, but for the most part, it's averages around 60 satellites. And so you need a lot of launches if you're going to get thousands of them in space to create this massive network. So it makes sense then that if this is a core business model and they need thousands up in space, they're going to be ramping up their launching capabilities and expanding across California. But it's also really important to realize Starlink is just one component. That's not all that they do. SpaceX also contracts with the federal government in helping with national defense. So they provide launching services for Space Force, Air Force, and other intelligence agencies. And so if there are any delays or disruptions in being able to carry out these launching capabilities, then you could argue that that actually poses a direct threat to national security. All of that to say, these launches are very important to SpaceX. It's basically what they do as an entire business. And so they need to be able to increase their capacities and capabilities. And that's why they moved out to Vandenberg back in 2013. And it's what they've been doing ever since then. So that brings us to 2024. And 2024 is when SpaceX ran into trouble. So they set the goal that they wanted to ramp up from 36 launches in a year to 50. And that posed a huge huge increase from what they had been doing year over year. And so with this ambitious goal, the California Coastal Commission stepped in and they said that SpaceX needed to get a coastal development permit in order to increase their launch activity so drastically. Now, they haven't had one of those permits for the past 10 years that they've been doing this, so why now? Well, originally, SpaceX didn't have to have a permit because they argued that one, Vandenberg was on federal land, and so it wasn't under the purview of the California Coastal Commission, and then two, they were performing federal activities. After all, if they're assisting with national defense, then they're not really under California's jurisdiction. It's more the Air Force, the Space Force, the FAA, more of these federal agencies that are overseeing their activity and that are allowing them to operate as they are. But the California Coastal Commission said that they received a series of complaints about impacts to wildlife, noise disturbances, marine debris, and public notifications. They also started to question if the launches at Vandenberg could really be classified as federal, because when it comes to activities like Starlink, that's a private activity. And so they started to ask how many of these launches are actually related to national defense or federal government contracts, and how much are private company activities that the California Coastal Commission should be able to regulate. But that wasn't all. On top of just obtaining a permit, they also required SpaceX to do a series of different studies that were associated with environmental impact reviews. Now, I am all for making sure that the activities of SpaceX or any company are not disrupting local neighborhoods, residents of people who live in these parts of California, and even hurting the wildlife and nature that surrounds them. However, listen to the way that Elon describes some of the studies that the California Coastal Commission was requiring that they do.
SpaceX had to do the study to see if Starship would hit a shark. And I'm like, it's a big ocean, you know. There's a lot of sharks. It's not impossible, but it's very unlikely. Then we said, okay, fine, we'll do the analysis. And then, well, can you give us the shark data? They're like, no, we can't give you the shark data. Well, like, okay, well then we're in a bit of a quandary. How do we solve this this shark probability issue? And they said, well, we could give it to our Western division, but we don't trust them. And I'm like, am I in a comedy sketch here? Eventually, I think we got the data and we could run the analysis to say like, yeah, the sharks are going to be fine. But they wouldn't let us proceed with launch until we did this crazy shark data. And then we thought, okay, now we're done. And they said, but what about whales? I'm like, and so we had to do the whale analysis. And it's like, okay, yeah, the whales will be fine too, you know. It goes on. And then there's like, well, what if the rocket goes underwater, then explodes, and then the whales have hearing damage? Like, this is real. This is actually, and we're like, look, if we could make a rocket go underwater and be a submarine, that would be like a feat of physics we could not accomplish, okay? This is why I'm really feeling the pain of the overregulation.
So really, it just seems completely outlandish. It's one thing to be asking for common sense measures to be taken to, again, protect the residents of neighborhoods and the surrounding wildlife. And it's another thing to just create so many different environmental scenarios to really overburden any corporation or business that is trying to just operate, it's trying to innovate, it's trying to do these incredibly amazing things with rockets. And really, you're just hindering them based on what? On sharks, on whales, on things that really aren't that probable of even happening in the first place. But really, all of that was to be expected from the California government. We expect no less than these outlandish environmental arguments. But really, the crux of the issue, the main point in the lawsuit that Musk wants to bring against the state agency, is the rejection of his plans to ramp up his launch capabilities based on some of the quotes that they brought up about his political affiliations. So there was a hearing that was held back in October of 2024, and it was during during that hearing that members of the Coastal Commission came together and they laid out their arguments for why they think that Elon Musk has to abide by these regulatory requirements, why he needs to get something like a permit and do all of these reviews. And it's also where they voted to reject his ability to be able to increase his launch capacities. Now, the contentious part is that during this hearing, members of the Coastal Commission actually read certain tweets or they said inflammatory statements about Elon Musk's political beliefs. Just listen to a few quotes of actual things that the members of the commission said during the meeting. Quote, Elon Musk is hopping about the country, spewing and tweeting political falsehoods and attacking the Federal Emergency Management Agency while claiming his desire to help hurricane victims with free Starlink access to the internet. We're dealing with a company, the head of which has aggressively injected himself into the presidential race. And this company is owned by the richest person in the world with direct control of what could be most expansive communication system in the planet. Just last week, that person was talking about political retribution. Now, my question is, what do these things, Elon Musk's involvement with Trump's campaign, his success and wealth accumulated from different businesses and years of hard work, and his political beliefs as shared on X, what do these things have to do with a company like SpaceX's ability to increase launching from 36 to 50 launches per year in the area? The answer is it has nothing to do with that. They should not be considering Elon Musk's political affiliations or access to the president or involvement in the government. They shouldn't be considering those things when they come to assess whether SpaceX needs to abide by environmental regulations. Those are completely separate issues. So really, it seems like these are just exposing biases in the members of the California Coastal Commission who don't want to work with Elon Musk's company because of his political beliefs. And that kind of bias, where personal opinion is overriding fairness or effectiveness, is what Americans are so tired of, obviously in our government, but also in the companies who create the products that we use every day. And that's why I'm so excited to tell you about Amalo Skincare. Amalo is a small family business that is dedicated to providing you with high-quality products that you can feel good about putting on your body and your skin. They value using well-sourced, high-quality ingredients like grass-fed, grass-finished tallow, organic sweet almond oil, and 100% pure and organic essential oils. Did you know that tallow actually closely resembles the structure of the human skin? And so because of that, that's why it can lock in moisture better. It's why it can prevent your skin from being oily. It can absorb without clogging pores. It is just a superpower in the skincare world. I use Amalo's tallow products every night before bed, and it has kept my skin so moisturized, so soft, and it honestly just smells amazing and feels so luxurious to be putting on. I personally love their vanilla latte scent. It smells like an actual vanilla latte, which just blows my mind, but they also have lavender, which is so soothing, especially at bedtime, and they even have more products than just tallow. So if you're ready for a natural, beautiful, and healthy glow, then you should go to amalo.com/TessAbraham to get 15% off your order. Some of the other things that they have as well, in addition to tallow, are clean perfume, lip gloss, and they even now have sunscreen. So you definitely want to check them out. Go to amalo.com/TessAbraham. That's AMALLOW.com/TessAbraham to get 15% off your order and to support the show. But getting back to SpaceX versus the California Coastal Commission, why is this all coming up now? If a lot of this transpired last year in 2024, then why is this back in the news and why are we talking about it? Well, like I mentioned earlier, just this week, a judge ruled that Elon Musk's case against the California Coastal Commission could proceed forward. So in his ruling, he said that, quote, SpaceX had presented enough information for now to support its claims that the California Coastal Commission was singling out the company for greater regulatory scrutiny. Now, the jury's still out on how this case will go, right? So ultimately, it could go before a judge, maybe a jury, and they could rule that the California Coastal Commission is not discriminating on the basis of political beliefs, and really that their concerns about the environment and doing all of these studies and reviews and getting a permit are completely valid. But I think that this sets a precedent that is too important for us to gloss over or miss entirely. The California Coastal Commission is a state agency, and yet in their meeting even about SpaceX and its ability to do more of these launches, they were bringing up concerns about his political affiliations. That in and of itself should be concerning to us. The fact that they sat in a hearing and said those quotes about the owner of a company, but that didn't pertain at all to the company's business and the actual operations that they were trying to request support and approval for, should concern us. Why? Well, because the Coastal Commission is a state agency that is run and operated by your tax dollars, and the members are put there by your elected officials who you give the power to. They are there to serve the public interest. They're supposed to serve the people of California in that area to make sure that wildlife and environmental concerns are heard and are addressed. But they're not there to be playing politics. They're not there to be talking about Elon Musk's association with the current president, or maybe the amount of power that they think that he has in the government. That's just their own opinion, or that they think that he's spewing hateful speech online. None of that has to do with the company's operations. And so it shouldn't even be coming up. That's a huge red flag. And it points to a much bigger issue that we should be concerned about, which is that when state officials use their power to pressure people based on their political beliefs, then it doesn't just stop with one person like Elon Musk or one billionaire company like SpaceX. If a state agency can target someone as powerful as Elon Musk and a company as big and as intertwined with the federal government like SpaceX, then you'd better believe that they're able to do it to just individual people, small business owners, or even religious organizations. This isn't just about rockets or about SpaceX or about environmental concerns. This is a much bigger issue about whether Californians are going to live in a state that is ordered by law and by process, or by personal bias and political grudges, which Californians cannot live in that kind of world, and we should not accept that that is happening. Now, I know that this can sound dramatic and it can sound really over the top, and I'm not trying to fear-monger you, but I think that it's important that we open our eyes to the realities of what is happening around us, because like I always say, we can't make real and effective change if we don't address and identify real problems. So what is this behavior that I am referring to? When else has this happened? Do we have real life examples? I have examples for you from just this year of this happening to local business owners and individual people. Just this year in Santa Ana, a small church was denied the right to meet in a commercial building, even though secular groups were allowed to do the exact same thing. So even though there were other groups who were meeting in this area, a church was actually denied the right to meet there because of their religious beliefs. And the federal government had to step in and remind California that religious rights are protected and that religious freedom is not optional, and so that they needed to be treated fairly and the same as the other people who are allowed to operate there. But that's not all. Also this year in Los Angeles County, officials tried to ban a local church from holding worship services on the beach. Now, they've been gathering there for 18 years of peaceful gatherings, but the state decided to shut down their operations, even though, again, more secular or public organizations were able to do the exact same thing. They allowed concerts and surf events, but the church was told that they weren't welcome. And even still, small businesses are facing the same thing. To no one's surprise, a California baker was dragged through the court system for not wanting to bake a cake for a same-sex couple's wedding. Now, this has gone through the court system, and so an appellate court recently ruled against her and argued that she must bake the cake for this couple, which sounds familiar because there have been so many cases like this across the country, and the Supreme Court has even ruled in favor of Christians for refusing service. However, unfortunately, because the appellate court ruled against her, now she is working to take this case all the way to the Supreme Court to also get justice for herself in her specific situation. And so we see that this is a pattern, that agencies are originally created to protect the public, but really just end up punishing people who don't agree with their ideology or with their political affiliations. But the important part to know is that often we don't hear about these cases. I didn't know about any of those cases that I just cited until I was researching for this episode. And the reason that we don't hear about them is because they affect normal, everyday people in California like you and me. They affect individuals. They affect small businesses. They don't all affect people on the grand scale like Elon Musk or SpaceX. And a lot of times people like you and me don't have the money, they don't have the time, they don't have the resources to be able to fight these issues in court or to be able to take them all the way to the Supreme Court. And so they just get dropped. People are unfairly treated or discriminated against, and no one even knows about it. So SpaceX's lawsuit against the California Coastal Commission is incredibly important for us to be aware of, to keep track of the progress on, and to be invested in, because more than just a warning shot, it's actually representation for all of the individuals or small businesses or religious organizations who have been oppressed by regulators in California and yet who have had to fight that fight alone. And let's not forget, this is not a lost cause or a worthless thing for us to track because, again, I want to remind you that these state agencies are appointed by elected officials. And so it all ties back to why and where your voice matters. You need to be informed about what agencies like the California Coastal Commission are doing because you need to understand that the people were put there by your certain elected officials. So when it rolls around to be time for the election, now you need to know that you're not just voting for someone to hold a certain office that's vague and broad and you have no idea what they're doing. They're holding an office that passes laws, and they're also holding an office that maybe has the power to appoint people like regulators who then are going to affect the businesses around you in your community. They're going to affect the religious organizations in your community, and they're going to ultimately affect you and your life. Plus, we just cannot become lazy or complacent in fighting authoritarianism. We have to keep calling it out. We have to raise awareness to these issues so that our state knows it can't just get away with doing this to individuals or groups in the dark. No, we are going to call it out. We're going to stay on top of it, and we are going to demand change. The fight over SpaceX is ultimately a fight of fairness, free speech, and the rule of law in California. And that should matter to all of us. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope it was helpful for you as you navigate life in our state and that you even learned something new. Please spread the word and share this show with your friends, family, and fellow Californians. And I'll see you back here next week for another episode of the California Conversation.